Hello, another EHCP update. So only 2 days ago, so literally it's Friday today, Jane was seen by an educational psychologist on Wednesday. I didn't really know what that entails fully, or I don't really know. They seem to have collated things from all reports that have been done on him over the years. So um, yeah, it's very it covers pretty much everything. So they rang me on Tuesday and I had no idea they were even coming. I was expecting it to be like another month or so because I'd been told like the backlog for ed psychs for EHCPs was huge at the minute in Worcestershire. And also that some of them are really, really bad. So yeah, I didn't know what to expect at all. She rang me on Tuesday. We just had a quick chat of kind of like what my hopes were for him, what I see as his biggest struggles, what had changed since, because obviously it was January that I initially did all the paperwork and things. So she just kind of asked if anything had changed, if he'd made much progress, and all those kind of things. And then she's observed him in class. I'm not sure how long for. Jane said like 10 minutes, but he has no concept of time, so it must have been a while. She's observed him in the classroom. She's took him out and done a few just simple. He was asked to read to her and like do a few other bits. Like when I've asked him, he said he didn't do anything. But in her report, it says like she asked him to read. She asked him. She did like some simple maths and some simple phonics work with him. And I don't know whether he was just really nervous or I don't know. Like what she's put is even lower. Like she's put that she said 3, 7, and 10, which is the biggest number, and he said 7. So I would have thought he was probably just nervous, but and that he couldn't spell his name, which obviously he's been writing his name for 2 years now. So yeah, it was probably just that he was very, very nervous with her. Um, she did. I don't know what I was saying. Oh, she did. There was one paragraph of the things that he said. So I'm like, don't know where my brain is today. Yeah, there was a few things of what he'd said, of what he struggles with, what he hates at school, what would make it easier, kind of thing. He said he wanted to take his dog into school with him, and he said that he hates having to go out to play. So, her. Well, I say recommendations, but I think when it's I'm not completely, but I think when it's ed psych, they have quite a lot of weight. So, what she says, hopefully, like, I cried reading it because it was I don't know whether negative is the right word. It's a good clean picture of Jade, but it's a tough read to see how much he does struggle and everything. And obviously school kind of shrug off a lot and say, yeah, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. And then obviously what they say to them, yeah, it agrees with how much he's struggling. So her recommendations, I don't think it says it says provision. So that is obviously when it comes to the HCP, it will be in the section of like provisions and outcomes and all that kind of thing. So here in the provisions, the words one-to-one, the words scaffolding support, the words individual support needs one adult that he's comfortable with, has a good relationship with, needs specialist staff who are trained in obviously autism, children with complex needs. So I am like praying that he gets. Oh, and it also says, I mean, it's a 13-page report, so it's a big report, but it also says that he needs supervision at break and lunchtime, which is what I have been like from day dot. If I could have just put in provision that I thought he needed from the second he started school, he would have had one-to-one throughout the day from when he arrives to when he leaves. That is what I believe he needs ongoing, one-to-one, all the way through. Whether or not that'll be what we get, I don't know. But to mention break time and lunchtime is huge because I know that's very, very unusual to get, even more than like what it says in there. I don't know whether this is completely true. It says that he has at the minute 15 hours small group support. So I guess funding wise, because initially they said that they didn't document how they spent his money, so I guess they divide that by the kind of 3 children that share that small group support. I don't really know. So yeah, there is now a TA for them in the classroom. They contradict themselves in these things, don't they? So at one point it said he gets 15 hours, and then it said they have recently increased it so that they have a TA in the classroom all the time, mainly around that small group support, so like the group of like 3 or 4 children. But yeah, it's everything I ever could have dreamed it be. Like I've read so many things recently of people having horrendous ones where it's they just literally copy and print out of other reports and don't actually add anything, don't actually put anything. So yeah, it's exactly what I wanted it to say. We just have to pray and hope that for the next stage that they literally just copy and print those bits into the HCP and that they don't change any of it, and then potentially he could get full-time one-to-one. But I will be disgusted obviously I'll be over the moon if he gets that, because that's what I've wanted from day one. But I'll also be disgusted that they can then say he has this level of need when at the beginning of this year they weren't even going to assess, they weren't even interested, and that he's had to struggle for 3 years in mainstream school with little to no support, to now say that he needs potentially 30 hours. Like, it is disgusting that they would let it get to the point where he is in key stage 2 now, which I always knew this was going to be the biggest, hardest leap, and he is struggling so much more than he did in year 2/1. And obviously it's still saying that he has emerging year 1, I'm still trying not to cry now, but it still says that he has emerging year 1 skills, which means that he is officially, it's a myth anyway, because they can't say, they used to say to qualify for an EHCP that they had to be like 2 years academically delayed, and that was one of the reasons why they turned it down, was that they said that he wasn't, but they've still got him down as being emerging year 1 skill level in, like, across the board, so like maths, English, phonics, reading, whatever, that he is the equivalent of what would that be, about to turn 6-year-old, and he's obviously in reality turning 8 soon. So, and it also, because I think, like, if he'd have had that one-to-one support throughout, then obviously he would have made a lot more progress. I said to her when I spoke to her on the phone, I was like, the thought of him just being sat there in the classroom sometimes with no idea of what's going on, like, how is that okay? Like, how does that happen, that these children are just completely lost in the system? But yeah, so we're finally getting somewhere, and I mean, they can, potentially they could still turn around and say, no, we've done the assessments and he doesn't need support, but that would be ridiculous, because obviously these reports are so in depth. I've not yet had the OT one. That was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. I've not had it. I don't know whether county have had it yet, whether they would have had it first, I don't know, but so the next, in theory, they should tell me whether or not they're going to do a draft and then do the draft. My friend's recently had one and she literally just got given a draft with no, they didn't say we made a decision, they were just like, here's the draft. So yeah, where are we now? Start of October. In theory, I was fully expecting a battle, because I was expecting at each stage it not to be what I was happy with. I was expecting, like, this report to not be at this, like, it's worse, if that's the right word. The report paints a true picture of my child, but I was expecting it to say, like, he's doing all right, and to have to really fight to get to where we need. I was expecting them to do a draft, and I was expecting them to give a plan, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is hopefully gonna be. So yeah, I was expecting it to be like, draft comes, I say no, not happy, go redo it. But the chances are, I don't want to count my chickens, but potentially it could just receive the draft, it could all be pretty much bang on, and then, in 6 weeks' time it could be completed. But then I would hope, from the severity of the need that's in that report, the funding that comes with it should be a fairly high band, and I still don't completely understand all that, so I need to have another look into all of that. But yeah, it needs to be someone's full-time salary, essentially, and if it's not, then we'll be going backwards and forwards until they give me what I need, because it needs to be, because I'm not having for 5 years for it to then school not. I want him to stay in the school that he's in. There was a couple of bits where I was like, does that mean, because obviously potentially they could say they can't meet need, they could pass them on to a SEND school or something like that. That's not what I want at the moment. When it comes to high school, I don't know, I can't see him ever going to a mainstream high school, but the other options aren't brilliant. But for now, what I'm hoping is full-time one-to-one, part-time in the classroom, part-time out of the classroom, so that he will have, because obviously he can pay attention a lot more when he's not distracted by the rest of the classroom and that kind of thing. And obviously his work needs to be so differentiated from the work that the rest of the children are doing in the classroom that at times it would just be easier for him to be out of the classroom with the TA rather than in. But either way, I'm crying happy and sad tears today because it's hard. It's a hard read, it really is, but it'll have a happy outcome because I'm hoping like the progress that he makes once it's all in place obviously will be different, and that he will then, I mean, he's never going to be academically where his peers are, but it will be a huge leap forwards. And I mean, as much as I try and do things with him at home and things, he gets so angry and so frustrated doing things with me that it's not really an option. And I've recently been looking into like getting him a tutor and things like that, but hopefully we won't have to now come to that because in some degrees it's almost like he's not been taught till this point. Does that make sense? Because he's so lost in, because he's so far behind. Even though they differentiate some things, it's not by any means enough. So potentially he's going to have his whole individualized curriculum, which will be just like purely for him. It needs to be very, I can't say the word, hands-on and sensory, and you know, like to get him involved, not just literally like sat at a table reading and writing. So it's going to be so far from what all the other children are doing, which is fantastic. But yeah, the battles are never over. So even once I've got a legally binding piece of paper, well, giant folder in front of me that says this is what needs to be done, blah blah blah, it's then whether or not school actually follow it, whether they do everything that needs to be done. So potentially he wouldn't stay at that school if they don't follow it or if they don't meet need, but for now it's all just positive, hopefully. And then I'll get on to fighting for Ella. So it's never ever ending, and I've been having a bit of breakdown lately. I'm kind of thinking like I'm just so burnt out, like every minute of every day, and like the battles and everything else that like recently I've been thinking like, should I be quitting work? Should I be obviously they're not at home during the day, but almost like I need to rest through the day to be able to cope through the mornings and evenings, if that makes sense. Like I don't physically have the energy. Like I feel like when I work through the day, then I don't have the same patience level or energy level obviously in the evenings as I do if I've not been at work. So it's something I've been considering, but I don't know what other options there are because something has to give, and obviously their needs, if anything, are getting greater, not less. So yeah, other than, I don't know, I don't really get any break as such. So yeah, it's a big thing to think about, but potentially that's coming in the future. I apologise to any of my clients if you're watching this, because I know you would be horrified at the thought, but like as much as I think like, oh, I could just cut down a bit, like realistically I think I'd either have to like stop completely or not. So yeah, it's something I've been thinking about, and financially when I've looked into it, it wouldn't make a huge difference to my finances. So yeah, it's I put an option because I had COVID a couple of weeks ago. Then I've had a stinking cold. There was like a gap in between, so it was like I had COVID, and then I literally like for a couple of days I was like, yes, I feel better, and then I got a really bad cold, and I just feel so like drained all of the time. And I think because I'm exhausted all the time anyway, then I'm more like what's the word? Vulnerable, not vulnerable. Like I catch like every single thing going around, and I feel rubbish all of the time because from like now until like March, April time, it's just like one constant cold, bug, whatever, just from being physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. I think you're just more run down, you just catch everything, don't you? So yeah, it's something, hopefully in a few weeks when I feel better. So I might just take a bit of a break. I might just have November off work maybe, and then I'll miss it, and then I want to go back for Christmas rush. So that's an option. I might just have like 2 or 3 weeks off in November and then see how I feel. I just feel awful as well, like obviously letting people down all the time when I'm poorly, when kids are poorly, the kids are struggling, whatever else. Like yeah, I'm just rambling now, but yeah, on the whole things are good, and it's positive, and it's where we should have been 3.5, 4 years ago. Well, obviously he was in special education 4 years ago, so yeah, 3 years ago when he was starting school from special education, he should have had a significant amount of support, which he hasn't. So we're finally catching back up, I think, to where we should have been 3 years ago.